Welcome to the podcast, folks. Today we're diving into the very dynamic situation in the South China Sea, specifically the Philippines stepping up with a U.S. Ohio class nuclear sub and a proposed UK troop presence to counter China's false arbitral claims.
Yeah, it's a real geopolitical chess game. Tell me, what exactly sparked this new move?
Well, ever since China lost that UN arbitration over Scarborough Shoal back in 2016, they've resorted to a curious mix of lawfare, propaganda, and gray zone military tactics to try to undermine the ruling. So, in response, the Philippines is not just sitting idly by.
Right, so it's like China's using these underhanded tactics, while Manila and its partners are countering with some pretty overt military and legal moves.
Exactly. It's like a direct pushback against the idea that international law can just be ignored. The Philippines, as a signatory of UNCLOS, is legally bound to uphold that arbitration ruling, which adds an extra layer of legitimacy
Yeah.
to their actions.
And now, with the US pitching in by sending that advanced Ohio class nuclear sub, it sends a strong message. Can you elaborate on why that matters so much?
Sure, so the Ohio class sub is not just any vessel. It's a nuclear powered submarine armed with a solid deterrence capability. Its stealth and endurance capabilities mean it can, operate in contested areas for long durations. It basically raises the stakes against any
Yes,
aggressive maneuvers by China in these waters.
that's pretty impressive. But then there's also the UK troop proposal, right? How does that factor in?
Right. The UK proposal for deploying troops to support security in the region adds an allied conventional military presence. It's like a dual layer approach. On one side, you have the high tech stealth sub, and on the other, you have ground forces that show commitment on the land and in logistical support for regional stability.
Absolutely. So essentially, Manila is leveraging both naval power and allied troop presence to send a clear message. But do you think these moves will actually deter China's tactics?
That's a tough call. I mean, on one hand, these moves are highly symbolic and serve as a robust deterrence. On the other, China has been pretty persistent with its mix of gray zone tactics. It's almost like a game of cat and mouse where both sides escalate yet never quite cross into open conflict.
Right? Yeah. And let's not forget that China has been quite adept at using legal and propaganda strategies to muddy the waters. It's fascinating how they try to invalidate an international ruling while, still operating under those legal constraints of international law.
Exactly, which brings us to an interesting point about the broader network of alliances. The Philippines isn't doing this alone. They're expanding naval cooperation with ASEAN partners, especially Vietnam, as well as with the US, UK, and even Australia.
That alliance building is super crucial. I mean, Vietnam, for instance, has this long, complicated history with China, right? They share a land border and a lot of cultural and historical complexities.
Uh huh, exactly. Vietnam is walking a fine line. They're cautious because of their extensive history with China, yet they know that a united front in the South China Sea is pretty important. The cooperation with Manila is pragmatic. It's not just about responding to a ruling, but also about protecting strategic maritime routes and national sovereignty.
Yeah, that really highlights how nuanced these relationships are. While the US and UK are playing a more overt military role, Vietnam's approach is more measured.
Absolutely, it's like different flavors of diplomacy and defense coming together. The US, by sending its Ohio class sub, is showing they're willing to provide high end capabilities, while the UK's proposition for troops reinforces a commitment to alliances. Meanwhile, Vietnam opts for a flexible security policy that avoids unnecessary provocation.
Yeah. So this multi-pronged approach is not just about countering lawfare, but also about ensuring that international maritime law is upheld in these contested waters.
Exactly. And let's not forget the legal aspect here. The UN arbitration ruling plays a sort of binding background role that underpins all these military moves. It's a legal bulwark that the Philippines and its partners can lean on to, legitimize their countermeasures against China's claims.
But here's where I get a bit skeptical. Isn't there a risk that such overt displays of military might could escalate tensions further rather than curtail them?
That's a well taken point. It's like, playing with fire. While these moves are designed to deter, they also run the risk of provoking an overreaction from China. The delicate balance is essentially walking that fine line between deterrence and escalation.
I see what you mean. Exactly. And then there's the whole propaganda angle. I mean, China is known for its sophisticated use of propaganda and legal maneuvers to turn international opinion. Do you think that strategy still has legs here?
Definitely. China's use of lawfare and propaganda remains a potent tool. It's like they're constantly twisting narratives to justify their actions, even when they're, on the wrong side of a legally binding ruling. In this context, the Philippines and its allies, by aligning their actions with international law, aim to cut through that fog of misinformation.
True. And it's interesting to see the regional power dynamics shift, with the US, UK, Australia, and now a more assertive Philippines coming together. It seems like this could reframe the balance of power in the South China Sea for the coming years.
Exactly, it's like a strategic recalibration. The introduction of advanced military assets like the Ohio-class sub, plus the combined force of allied nations, signals a collective intent to preserve freedom of navigation and enforce the rule of law in the region.
And speaking of recalibration, the proposal for UK troops is also fascinating. It definitely adds a new dimension, a direct, on-the-ground show of support that could have long-term implications for regional security.
Right, it's a multi-domain approach. There's the maritime domain with the sub, the land element with troops, and even the legal and diplomatic fronts. But I'll challenge this a bit. Don't you think that a heavily militarized response might also close off some channels for diplomacy?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. I mean, sometimes too much muscle can stifle dialogue, right?
Precisely. It's a tension between deterrence and diplomacy. However, given China's repeated disregard for international rulings and its propensity for gray zone tactics, many argue that a robust, multi-layered deterrence strategy might be essential for maintaining stability.
Absolutely. That does make sense. It's almost like a necessary paradox. Use strength to preserve a framework that ideally would render such strength unnecessary.
Exactly. It's like if you over-prepare, you might actually risk escalating conflicts, yet under-prepare, and you invite infringement upon international laws and norms. The challenge is in calibrating the right level of response.
And this calibration is particularly tricky because of the historical and cultural complexities in the region. With nations like Vietnam, which have a long intertwined history with China, I imagine their approach is more measured.
Yeah, absolutely. Vietnam's cautious and flexible posture stems from its legacy of conflict and cooperation with China. They're balancing national security and economic considerations carefully, which means that while they support a strong stance in the South China Sea, they're not rushing into overt confrontation.
Right? So, in sum, we have a layered response. Legal backing from the UN arbitration, military enhancements with high-tech assets and allied troops, plus delicate diplomatic balancing among regional players.
Yep, that's a good summary. And it's like the bigger question is how sustainable this balancing act is. Can these alliances hold strong if, say, tensions abruptly escalate?
That's the million-dollar question. Indeed. And when you consider the rapid technological developments in naval warfare, like advanced submarines and surveillance capabilities, it might further complicate the strategic calculations.
I agree. The infusion of new military tech can be a double-edged sword. It enhances deterrence but also raises the stakes for miscalculation or unintended escalation. It's like having this powerful tool that requires an equally delicate hand.
And it's not just about military might. There's also the broader narrative of upholding international law, where every move reinforces the status quo that rules should govern disputes.
Right. The legal framework is the backbone of their argument. By sticking to internationally recognized rulings, the Philippines and its partners are not just acting out of impulse. They're embedding their actions within a globally accepted
Certainly.
legal order.
It's like a game where rules actually matter, and undermining them could have long-term consequences for all players.
Exactly. And while the short term tactical maneuvers might seem aggressive, they're ultimately aimed at preserving a system that, ideally, discounts unilateral power plays. It's a nuanced dance between power projection and maintaining legal order.
Yeah, indeed. And that dance is closely watched by countries across the globe. Every step taken here could set a precedent for international relations in other contested regions.
Absolutely. In essence, these moves serve as a litmus test, not just for the involved parties, but for the entire international community dedicated to upholding maritime law and the rule of law.
Exactly. Well, it's been a fascinating dive into these issues. The interplay of military might, legal legitimacy, and diplomatic subtlety really makes the South China Sea a pivotal theater in global politics.
Yep, and as with any dynamic geopolitical scenario, we'll be watching closely to see how these strategies evolve and whether they successfully balance deterrence with diplomacy. Thanks for joining the discussion, everyone.